Welcome to Geek Philosophy, where we love geeky wisdom. If you're new to the channel, my name's Brian. And if you've been watching the channel for a while, you've heard me say that before. Welcome to Geek Philosophy, where we love geeky wisdom. Where we love geeky wisdom. Where we love geeky wisdom. But sometimes you can get overwhelmed with all the geeky wisdom that's provided by so many different sources here on YouTube or anywhere else online, or even with friends that you play with at the table. Advice comes in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes it works really well for what you're trying to do. But then there are times where advice from one source is in direct conflict with advice from another. What do you do? Well, I want to examine some examples of conflicting advice and then share my ideas of how you might deal with that. Then I want to provide a few of my own general tips for when you encounter other forms of conflicting advice moving forward. All right, let's first talk about a big one that's been around for a long time: sticking with the rules as written, or the rule of cool. Now, on the one side, strictly sticking to the rules is a good way to make sure that things are fair and predictable when you're playing the game. And it ensures that all the players understand the boundaries of the game and they can anticipate the outcomes of their actions as player characters in the game. On the other hand, the rule of cool suggests that if bending the rule makes for a better, unforgettable moment in the story and the game itself, it may be worth the change. Now, this perspective really prioritizes the storytelling aspect of tabletop role-playing, and it creates for memorable experiences over rigid structure. If your players really enjoy planning out specific actions, or like when the game world operates within the rules laid out in the books, then you may want to stick to the rules as written more often than not. This may actually be more satisfying for them. But if you're playing in a group that really enjoys narrative storytelling and leans on that rather than understanding and knowing all the rules of the game, then the rule of cool might be a good move for you. I think that usually things end up somewhere in between. So the key is really communication. Discuss the type of game that everybody at the table is interested in playing, and then that will help strike the balance that you're looking for. All right, that kind of makes sense, right? You want to strike a balance between two approaches. But what about all that advice about game preparation and how you get ready for the game itself? There are those game masters who really recommend thoroughly planning out each session. They could even make a solid argument saying that preparing this way helps you understand all the multiple directions that players may take, and it builds a safety net, so you can always have confidence when you start your game. However, on the flip side to that, all that extensive planning might actually seem like a safety net, but really lead to frustration. Because the nature of playing a tabletop role-playing game means that sessions rarely go exactly as planned, if you're really not trying to railroad your characters, that is. So over-planning may leave you feeling disappointed between, what you had in your mind and what actually happened at the table. There are game masters who advise to take a more improvisational, on-the-fly type of style. And this is where the game master reacts to the player's choices in real time, allowing for that game to feel more organic and it's player-driven. But you may not be comfortable with that yet. You may not be relaxed enough and understanding enough about how the system works to be able to run a game just on the fly without much planning at all. What do we do with this bit of conflicting advice? Well, I think, again, it means striking a balance between planning and improv. And they both have their own set of benefits. Basic planning can give you a foundation to build upon, a map to guide you through the narrative landscape. And it sets the stage, giving you confidence in your world that you're trying to invite your players into. It ensures that you're giving direction in the story, but it's just a sketch. It's a rough outline of the picture that you and your players will be coloring in and finishing up together. But improvisation opens up the door to spontaneous creativity. This type of approach encourages you to say yes and or no but, and you can weave your players' actions and decisions directly into the fabric of the story. And this can lead to a genuinely unique and memorable gameplay experience. It really showcases the collaborative storytelling power of tabletop role-playing games that you can't really get out of other types of gaming. So maybe the trick is to lean in, like we talked about before, and figure out what works best for you and strike that balance. Start with a simple structure for your sessions and understand the key plot points you'd like to hit and interesting NPCs that the players might encounter. And this approach gives you enough material to feel prepared, but not so much that you're locked into a rigid storyline. Now, the more comfortable you get with improv, the more you improv. And the more you want those notes, the more you prepare. It's up to you to strike that balance and have the freedom to adapt and evolve the story based on the choices that your players are making, but also based on the work that you put in ahead of time. Okay, those couple of examples that we started with aren't that bad, right? Because you can find a middle ground. But what about how to handle something that's not so much a gradient that you try to figure out? A different type of solution that you're looking for. How to handle player character death. Now, the question of how to handle this type of situation where one of your player characters dies in the middle of the game is a significant one and it's been around forever. Now, some people argue that character death should always serve the narrative in a meaningful way, and that makes sure that the players feel that their character's ends contribute to the story. But others say that the risk of character death adds tension and realism to the game, and it is a game, which means if they drop below a certain amount of hit points and they fail all those death saves, then they should die as characters because that's what's in the rules. And this could be really tricky to navigate because you might have different opinions at your table. I think that here you have to be informed by the tone of the campaign you're trying to play and the preference of your players. Some players might really appreciate the high-stakes game where death is constantly a threat looming around the next corner, but others might feel that this is not the type of game they want. They want something where character death is rare and always significant to the story. Again, I think communication with your players is key. In my opinion, you have to find out the type of game your players want to have at the table and how they feel about character death before you start. But you may have different thoughts about all three of these examples, and that's the point. So if you do, let me know in the comments below before we move forward, because I want you to have your own advice, your own bit of geeky wisdom shared with the rest of us. All right, so we've covered a few specific topics that have conflicting opinions, and those are ones that have popped up over the years in many ways and forms. But how do we handle things like this that pop up moving forward? Well, here are a few general tips that may help. First, contextualize the advice. Not all advice will be a good fit for your game. Each piece of advice has to be assessed to see how it aligns with you and your players' preferences and the type of campaign you're running. The goal is to create the most engaging and enjoyable experience for everybody involved. Next, evaluate your sources. Look for advice from sources with experience running games that you admire or that are similar to the type of game you want to run. There are lots of different games out there that you can actually watch via YouTube or other sources. So look for the types of game you want to run and take a look at their successes and their failures and see what type of practical insights you can gain from all of those common pitfalls that might show up along the way. You should also experiment within your game. Be open to trying out different approaches. You don't have to do everything all at once, and as a matter of fact, you don't want to change too much, but adjusting your storytelling techniques and changing a few game mechanics, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you don't leave everybody's head spinning from all of the drastic changes. Next, be sure to apply critical thinking and adaptation. You have to use your judgment to adapt the advice that you receive to better fit your game's needs. It's important to remain flexible and willing to adjust your approach based on what's most fun and engaging for you and your group. And you have to learn through doing. You can watch as much stuff or read as much stuff as you want, but at the end of the day, if you don't try things, it's going to be really hard to make them realistic for your game. So have that constructive feedback coming in from your players when you can to refine your GMing skills. But remember, growth comes from experience, so you're going to face challenges and you're going to have to overcome them as you go, and that's how you'll get better. Finally, trust your creativity. Allow your own creative ideas to guide the development of your campaign. Advice can be great, it can be really helpful, but unique experiences that you create with your players are what really define the state of your game. And remember, your sources for advice, their experience is what gave them the ability to offer that advice in the first place. So, you can be that for someone else. All right, there you have it, an advice video kind of about advice. All right, that might be a little too meta, but I think you will get my point. If you found today's video helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss out on any of the other videos that we have coming up. Let me leave you with a little bit of geek philosophy from the wise man himself, Uncle Iroh. It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole. Cheers.